antique stores, flea markets, junk shops. I'll happily sit on the floor of the dirtiest shop imaginable and look through piles of music. That's how I find it all. My husband is very patient. He's not patient in some areas, but he will wait for hours when I look at music.
Really?
He said it's worth it to see the expression on my face when I come out.
Oh.
This is quite rare. You've heard of the song, You're a Grand Old Flag? It first came out with that title, You're a Grand Old Rag.
Really?
And there was such a hue and cry about it that the publisher recalled all but a very few, and I was lucky enough to find one. And he didn't mean, George Cohan didn't mean to insult the flag, but it was just an expression, you're a grand old rag. Didn't go over too big. This is one of my blues I thought was especially colorful and cute. It's all blues, starting here, all that. There's some wonderful covers in the blues. This is an old, let's see, 1891, The Auctioneer. This is kind of neat. This was written in 1925. And I got a note on here, according to the lyrics of this song, we aren't due to have our first woman president until the year 2025. They're predicting in this song written in 1925. And you see, they're predicting that in our age now, women will be dressed like that, which isn't too far from them. Don't see very often. It's a song about Mormons, which mill disaster. It's an actual happening in 1878. It was the largest flour mill in the United States. Exploded, claimed 18 lives, decimated the surrounding area, and brought instant notoriety to Minneapolis. 1888, 13 were stranded. And this is a true story. Just kind of interesting Sherlock Holmes. This I found last year. Please build the Boulder Dam. It was written years before Hoover Dam was actually built. And I found it right in Boulder City. And it was sitting, displayed in an antique store there, only it was kind of sitting in a china cabinet, and it was all folded over. It didn't have cardboard backing on it or anything. And Jack and I had just toured the Hoover Dam. And I thought, wow, that's a piece of history. So actually, they wanted more than I wanted to pay for it. When I first saw it, it looked so awful because it was all bent over. And he had a price of $25 on it. I thought, oh, not worth that much. So I didn't take it. Well, then, it was right out that same day, Jack and I took a tour boat to see Hoover Dam. And I sat there looking at it, and I said, am I crazy? I better go back and get that music. But the strange part of it was, I showed it to an antique dealer in Boulder City, and he really wanted it, of course, but it was going back to North Dakota with me. But anyway, he was determined to find out how it came to be in that antique store. And about a month later, he emailed me, and he said, you're not going to believe this, but this piece of music that I have was donated to the mayor of Boulder City, and he consigned it to the antique store. And it ended up in North Dakota. It was really neat. And this was based on I'll take it out. This was 1919, published in New Orleans. And there actually was a serial killer called the Axeman. Oh, they eventually apprehended him, but political is a big, here's an example of a political sheet, Woodrow Wilson. this is kind of interesting. It's called the Ice Palace March, and it's by a very famous composer named E.T. Paul. A lot of collectors just concentrate on his work because it had such interesting covers. But this particular illustration was of his own home, and he had had water pipes break and flooded his home, so it turned into an ice palace. That was built during the 1870s, and it was given to me years ago, about 10 years ago, by a Gerald Mellick, who was a mail carrier in Jamestown for years. He called me several times saying he had heard that I liked old pianos and music, and he said he had an old piano that he wanted me to have. And the first 2 times he called, I said, well, you know, I really don't need another piano. I was envisioning a pile of junk, you know. He said it was down in his basement, and finally he called. He said, I'd really like you to have this piano. So I told Jack, I said, well, go down and see what it is. So he went down there to look at it, and he called me and he said, you want this piano. Although it was down in their basement, the top was down, it was covered with canning jars, but he could see it was a gorgeous piano. Anyway, it originally belonged to Gerald Mellick's great uncle, who played in a band in the late 1800s, about 1890s. And when he died, it was donated to the Grand Theater, and it was used for silent movies in the Grand Theater. When silent movies went out, it was moved upstairs in the Grand Theater for the Sons of Norway Lodge. When they disbanded their room there, it was moved into Mr. Mellick's mother's house, who was the only one that had room for it. And it sat there for many years until Mrs. Mellick died. Then the family got together. They all wanted to take it to the dump. Well, Mrs. Gerald Mellick, who didn't play the piano, her husband didn't play the piano, said, we cannot send a beautiful piano like that to the dump. I'll store it in my basement. Maybe I'll learn to play it someday. There it sat for 30 years until he called me, and Jack went down and looked at it. Because it was, you know, really grimy, you know, from sitting. It wasn't a finished basement. It was just a basement. And we got it. Jack had to get 6 guys to help him. They took it apart, and they had to take the railings off of the basement stairway and the doors off so they could get it out of that basement. And then they somehow got it in here. It weighs many tons. It's just incredibly heavy. Anyway, I started cleaning on it, and it came out like that. It's completely original. Anyway, that piano we want to donate to somewhere in Jamestown eventually, because it definitely belongs. I've talked to Reese and Margaret Hawkins, and they would love to have it in the Louis L'Amour Museum, which I'm hoping will come to be. That would be a perfect place for it. So if that museum were to be built soon, I would gladly part with the piano right away.